Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're checking out an updated solo Stamina Dragonknight build for the Elder Scrolls Online. And what we've got here is a heavy attack build for the Stam DK. So a combination of 3 unique sets, as well as skills that make your heavy attacks as strong as possible, dealing tons of damage, and it's a lot of fun and pretty easy to play. In this video, I will be going over a 1-bar setup if you're interested, as well as how you can add a second skill bar to make the build even stronger. As always, we'll be going over the stats, the gear set options, skills, champion points, and everything else that makes it work, and that's coming up next. All right, everybody, here we go on the new solo Stam DK PVE build. I will be going over a 1-bar setup first, which is a lot of fun to play. It can handle dungeons and world bosses pretty easy. Of course, I'll go over the 2-bar setup if you want to do more damage. Also, keep in mind this is a solo build, not a pure DPS build, so just keep that in mind. We'll talk about survivability, damage, shields, healing, and everything you need to solo in ESO. So, starting off with our stats, let me go ahead and buff up my weapon damage and recoveries. No armor buff on the 1-bar setup, but we are still pretty tanky. 15k max magicka, almost 21k max health, 32k max stamina, 500 mag recovery, 1000 health recovery, almost 800 stamina recovery. And our weapon damage is sitting at about 4200 with our weapon damage buffs there. Of course, you can get this over 5,000 with some of our sets, as well as a back bar glyph, so we'll talk about that coming up soon. Also, weapon critical, 45%, about 19k spell, and 16k physical resist. This is in a medium armor build, by the way. I think I'm doing 6 medium and 1 heavy for this setup. 64 points into stamina because this is a Stamina Dragonknight build. I'm using the Lover Mundus for that extra physical penetration. That's going to make sure some of our procs and our heavy attacks hit as hard as possible. Then I am using the Gold Food Bewitched Sugar Skulls. That's going to be your best in slot for both resources as well as your health recovery. We have over 1,000 health recovery, which is a nice bonus, especially if you want to run this on 1 bar. In terms of potions, I am running something new here. This is called the Essence of Weapon Crit. This is a crafted potion that gives you weapon critical, obviously, but also stamina and stamina recovery, as well as health and health recovery. So these are great if you can make these. It gives you a good burst heal when you need it, plus that extra 20% health recovery is going to stack nicely on our Dragonknight build. Now, in terms of race, I think there are plenty of good options you can do on Stamina Dragonknight. If you're solo, one of my favorites is Nord. I am on the Nord with this setup. And of course, you get max health. Cold resistance isn't really a big deal. You get the max stamina, which is nice. You get extra ultimate generation, which if you understand the Dragonknight class, you know that you get some of your recovery back from using ultimates, so that's really nice on a Dragonknight setup. But why I like this especially is the rugged passive, almost 4k physical and spell resistance. It's going to be really nice for soloing on a medium armor setup because we get all the extra resistances of heavy basically, while also running medium armor and getting the nice medium armor crit passives and things like that. So Nord is pretty cool for this build. I do prefer it, but of course you could be an Orc for more damage. That would be a very strong setup. Redguard would be nice as well. Even Dark Elf, Khajiit, you can basically make anything work here. So that is the basic setup. Now in terms of the item sets, this is where it really starts to get interesting. Starting off with Ravager as my first 5-piece set. So this is a heavy armor set. It is from Cyrodiil, though you can buy this, I think, pretty cheaply now on guild stores. This gives you weapon critical, max health, weapon damage. All those are great for a solo stamina build. But then the 5-piece did get updated recently. Each time you reduce your target's physical or spell resistance, you gain a Ravager stack for 5 seconds. That increases your weapon damage by 125. And there's a max of 4 stacks where you'll get 10 seconds of that max damage, but then you'll have to start stacking over again. So 125 times 4, that ends up being basically 500 weapon damage. That's why I mentioned we can get easily over 5k when we're fully buffed on this setup. Now I'll go over the skills in a minute, but it's very easy to proc this on a Dragonknight because one of our main abilities does reduce armor. Then I have a little secret here as far as the other 5-piece set, which is actually going to proc this super, super easily. So what should you run for Ravager? Well, obviously the weapon is going to be important. So front bar, I'm using a Nirn-honed Maul. That's just going to give me the most weapon damage possible. Plus Mauls give you a little bit extra passive physical penetration, which is really good. So that's going to cover 2 pieces. Remember, 2-hand weapons are worth 2. And then just 3 pieces of jewelry here. And I have weapon damage as my enchant. If you have the transmute stones, you can benefit a lot from transmuting these to infused. We really don't need any recovery at all on the setup because this is a heavy attack build, remember? So we're getting lots of sustain from our heavy attacks. So you can totally go max damage and not worry about sustain. So our next 5-piece set is a medium armor set called Sunderflame. This comes from the City of Ash dungeon. You can run City of Ash 1 or 2, normal or veteran, does not matter. And we're running 5 pieces of this on the body, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get. What Sunderflame does, if you're not familiar with this one, it adds max stamina, weapon damage, weapon critical, almost the same as Ravager, except we get stamina instead of health. But then check this out. When you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you deal some additional flame damage, and you apply minor breach and minor fracture to the enemy, which also reduces their spell and physical resistance for 8 seconds. So remember that condition of Ravager is that I need to be reducing my target's resistance. Well, basically with Sunderflame, what happens is every time you heavy attack, you can proc Ravager. You're basically reducing your enemy's armor every heavy attack. Every time you hit them with that heavy attack smash, you're going to reduce their resistances and get an extra stack of Ravager. So I just find that these 2 sets in combination is a pretty cool way to play on the heavy attack DK build. This is a lot of fun. So I am doing 5 pieces of medium armor. So that's going to be feet, legs, hands, waist, and chest. Those are all max stamina, and then divines for the trait. If you can manage to get those, that's going to give you the most benefit. Now, finally, for our monster set, I'm totally going heavy attack theme still. Found a heavy attack monster set that really works well for this. This is called Spawn of Mephala. Now, I believe this comes from Fungal Grotto 2 on the veteran rank. You'll have to finish that dungeon to get this monster helm. That's pretty interesting. You do get the max stamina 1 piece, which is great for a stamina Dragonknight. Then check out the 2 piece. When you deal damage, again, with a fully charged heavy attack, you create a web that does poison damage for 10 seconds. About 1,500 poison damage every second. It also reduces the speed of your enemies in that web, and it has a 10-second duration. So basically, you can proc this off of cooldown. So I just thought this was a really cool set to combine with a heavy attack build. We're already doing a lot of heavies. It's going to give us some extra AoE poison damage. Of course, Dragonknights do have some passives as far as poison damage. This will actually help sustain your build if you proc the poison status effect. So you get even more benefit for running this on a Dragonknight. So definitely check that out. If you don't have it, that's fine. You can run, a classic like Bloodspawn monster set. You could run Slimecraw for the extra damage. You can do a lot of things here. Iceheart, even if you want a damage shield. But Mephala is an interesting choice for this build, I thought. Now, as far as the traits there, 1 piece of heavy is going to be nice. So I got the heavy helmet here, and then just a medium shoulders. So 6 pieces of medium, 1 piece of heavy, everything divines if you can. And then I left the max health enchant here on the head, because a little extra health never hurts, especially on a solo setup. Now, let's talk about the skills. I will be talking about a 1-bar setup first, and then I'll tell you how you could adjust this for a 2-bar setup. Starting with our 2-hand ability, Brawler. Brawler comes from the 2-handed skill line. That is the 3rd ability that you get, and Brawler is the preferred morph for soloing on stamina builds because you get this juicy damage shield. This actually increases with champion points. It increases with your weapon damage. So if I were to buff this, then my tooltip goes up to about 1,000 more. And then once we get over 5k damage, it'll be over 7,000 damage shield. So this is quite strong just at base. And then it does scale up. The more enemies you hit, you get even more of a shield. So this is really, really nice just for staying alive on this build. And next up, we've got Venomous Claw. This is a single target damage over time ability. This comes from the Dragonknight class skill line. Ardent Flame, this is the 2nd ability that you get. Venomous Claw is the stamina morph. Does tons and tons of damage over time. Poison damage, actually. This does do 20% more damage each hit. So make sure you're not recasting this too early. You want to ideally let this play out for the full 14-second duration and then recast it to get the most benefit from this. Next up on the 1-bar setup is Noxious Breath. This is also from Ardent Flame. This is the third ability that you get. Noxious Breath is the stamina morph, and this does really good upfront damage. It does good poison damage over time. It is an AoE as well, so you can handle crowds and clearing trash through dungeons really well with this ability, combined with Brawler. But check out that second effect here, Major Fracture. This reduces our target's physical resistance. So remember, proccing Ravager, you need to have a resistance debuff. This will, of course, count for that. So if you do a Noxious Breath into a heavy attack, right away you'll get 2 debuffs. You'll count for 2 out of 4 of those Ravager stacks in basically 1 second. So I do apply this early and then keep it up 100% of the time so that you have your enemy debuffed completely. Now next up, we needed a heal. We needed a very good heal for the 1-bar setup. So I went with a skill called Ring of Preservation here. This actually comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. That's in your guild skills. It is the second ability you get for the Fighters Guild. And the Ring of Preservation morph is the healing morph. You can see we get a lot of really nice effects from this. We get minor protection, so that's 8% damage reduction. We get minor endurance, so that's increased stamina recovery. And we get a pretty good heal. Also, keep in mind that this heals every half second. That's not a 1 second heal, so you'll effectively get double this healing. This does scale up quite a bit with your weapon damage. So over 700 there every half second. It can crit as well, so you'll get over 1k crits on this, no problem. It does last 8 seconds, so you do need to recast this a little bit frequently. Just keep it up and it'll keep your defenses really solid. Then our last normal ability here is going to be Molten Armaments. This comes from Earthen Heart. That is the second ability that you get. And Molten Armaments is important. This is the morph that you want because this buffs your heavy attacks by 50%. Yep, 50% damage buff to your heavy attack. So we already have really good heavy attack build here, and now we're getting extra damage from this ability. So you want this up all the time if you can. We also get Major Brutality. That's the 20% weapon damage buff by casting that. So you can get that from Rally, but you just get so many more benefits from running Molten Armaments on the Stam DK. It's an amazing skill. Lasts a good 30 seconds. So this is something that you want to run for sure. Ultimate here, I have Take Flight. That's the ultimate from this skill line. Take Flight is the stamina-based morph, the physical damage morph. You can see we do tons of physical damage. It's also basically a movement skill because you'll fly through the air, you'll do a big leap, and a big stun on your targets when you land. So this is a super fun ultimate, great for clearing trash, great through making your way through a dungeon quickly, and it's just a lot of fun to use this. Now in terms of flexing this, you can choose another ultimate here. I would recommend, if you're fighting something like a boss, that you use Standard of Might instead. Standard of Might is the Ardent Flame ultimate, and why Standard of Might is really good for bosses is you do get increased damage done and reduced damage taken. So you can see right there, standing in the area increases your damage done by 15% and reduces your damage taken. So this is going to be very nice for soloing a boss because you're going to do more damage. You're going to take less damage from the boss. So I definitely recommend you swap that out. What else could you swap? Well, if you're doing, like, let's say dungeon crawling or XP grinding, gold grinding, you won't really need Venomous Claw. This is more of a single target boss ability. Instead, you could run something like Camouflage Hunter. That's also from the Fighters Guild skill line. That'll give you some extra weapon damage from your Fighters Guild passives, as well as Minor Berserk when you do crit damage from behind an enemy. So that's a nice ability to slot there. All right, so let's talk about how the skills would work. How would you combine these skills on a 1-bar setup? So let me find some enemies here and just show you the basic rotation. Obviously, you want to buff up with your potion. Then your Molten Armaments. I like to go right into a Noxious Breath, as well as a Brawler for that damage shield, and then you just basically heavy attack. You can see with each heavy attack, I'm going to stack up my Ravager, and I'm also doing bonus damage from the Sunder Flame set. That's basically how that works. If that was a boss, obviously I would apply Venom Claw. Then you can use your ultimate as needed, obviously. So something like that. Remember, your heavy attack too does splash damage We'll talk about that when we get to the passives. Heal up with your ring if you need it. But remember that heavy attack is going to do a lot of damage. So there you go. Let's talk about what you would flex in for 2 bars here. I would keep Take Flight as my front bar ultimate. I would keep Brawler, Venom Claw for bosses, Noxious Breath. All this stuff is good. But these abilities are basically buffs, so you could move them to your back bar. In that case, what I would recommend is slotting an Execute on your front bar. You can do from the two-handed skill line Reverse Slice. This does bonus damage when an enemy is low health. And it also does AoE splash damage. So this is very, very strong execute ability. That's the 4th ability from the two-hand skill line. You can do Reverse Slice for the AoE splash damage or Executioner for pure single target damage. Kind of up to you there. And then for my last ability on the front bar, I would just do a passive skill here. Something like Camo Hunter is going to be really strong. This gives you minor berserk as well as extra weapon critical. So that's how I would adjust the front bar setup. Now for the back bar, you have a lot of options actually. Something that you might think about is kind of crazy, but you can try it. It's kind of fun. Run a Flame Staff on your back bar. Now, why would you run a Flame Staff? Well, if you happen to have a Maelstrom Staff, you can actually get a bunch of extra heavy attack damage from running a Maelstrom, either a Destruction Staff, Lightning Staff, or Ice Staff. You can see here, from this item, we have an extra 1341 heavy attack damage to any enemy that's standing in the wall. So this combined with all our other amps, our Molten Armaments, our CP, this is going to make those heavy attacks absolutely brutal on this build. So if you have that, you can run that. If not, then I would just run a bow. Any bow will be fine. You could get something like a bow of agility. The main thing that you want to worry about is whatever your back bar weapon is, you have an infused trait with a weapon and spell damage glyph. That's going to get your weapon damage on the build well over 5,000. So that's what you want. Then depending on what you have, you would either just run, like I said, Blockade from the Destruction Staff skill line, or you could run Volley from the Bow skill line. Either one will proc that glyph for you and give you some extra damage over time. Other abilities I would recommend if you're doing a 2-bar setup, Barb Trap is very good. This is from the Fighters Guild skill line right here. That's the last ability that you get. And this does give you really good damage over time, as well as the minor force buff. So that's going to make our critical hits do 10% increased damage. So this is a very nice skill to have on your back bar. You also get some extra passive weapon damage. You can move Ring of Preservation back here for the heal still. Keep your Molten Armaments. And then since you have some extra slots, you can actually run an armor ability here on the second bar. I prefer Volatile Armor for the extra magic damage over time. It comes from Draconic Power. That's the first ability that you get. You can choose either morph, but I do prefer Volatile Armor just for the extra dot damage. And then I would still recommend running Standard of Might for the back bar. That's just your go-to kind of boss ultimate when you want to reduce your damage taken and increase the damage that your character does. You definitely want to use that ultimate. All right, let's talk about the passives that you need for the Dragonknight class. A lot of these are super important, so make sure you grab the ones that I mentioned. Under Ardent Flame, Combustion just gives us sustain. We talked about the different poisoned effects that we're doing, right? We have our Venom Claw, we have our Noxious Breath, we also have the Mephala set. Any of those can proc the poison status effect, and this gives you 500 flat stamina. Really, really good for sustain. Warmth, you don't need this necessarily. This just puts a snare on your enemy. Searing Heat, though, this passive is amazing. This increases the damage from your Fiery Breath, Searing Strike, and Dragonknight Standard. Now, those are all the base skills, but this does apply to the morphs as well. So that's going to apply to Venom Claw, Noxious Breath, and your Standard of Might Ultimate. So definitely get that guy. And then World in Ruin, this increases the damage of your Standard of Might. It also decreases the cost of your stamina-based poison abilities, so things like Venom Claw and Noxious Breath are going to be super cheap with that passive. Make sure you grab that. Draconic Power, you don't need these necessarily on the 1-bar setup, but once you run your armor buff, if you're doing 2 skill bars, then you'll get access to a lot of these. Iron Skin you can get either way. You get increased block mitigation. Burning Heart, this is giving you extra healing received when that armor buff is active. Elder Dragon also gives you some health recovery, and then Scaled Armor, this is what increases your spell resistance. Now, Earthen Heart, I forgot to mention this when we talked about skills. Earthen Heart has some of the best passives in the game, you guys. So we need an Earthen Heart ability no matter what. That's why you want to run Molten Armaments, even on a 1-bar Stam DK. So you get Eternal Mountain. This is what's going to increase that to 36 seconds. You get that 20% duration boost. That is a huge deal. Then Battle Roar. When you cast an ultimate, you restore 46 health, magicka, and stamina. Now, Mountain's Blessing is a great passive. This gives us the Minor Brutality buff for 20 seconds, increasing our weapon damage by 10%. So remember, we have also Major Brutality from Molten Armaments. That's a 20% buff, and then we have Minor Brutality from the passive. So when you cast that ability, you get 30% bonus weapon damage. That is huge. Make sure you get that one. Then Helping Hands, you'll get a little bit of stamina back, actually, by casting Molten Armaments, so that's good as well. For the 1-bar setup, you'll want all of your two-handed abilities. Something that I forgot to mention is the follow-up passive. When you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, your next direct damage attack used within 7 seconds deals an additional 10% damage. And now this can actually stack. So if you end up doing maybe 3 or 4 heavy attacks in a row, each heavy attack will actually hit for 10% more than you did with the one before. So in terms of like fighting a boss where you have a longer rotation, hit the boss with all your debuffs, hit them with all your dots, and then do about 4 heavy attacks in a row. That's because each heavy attack, again, is going to get buffed by the follow-up passive. That is definitely the best one there. Battle Rush is also good. You get 30% stamina recovery after each kill. Now, in terms of your back bar, if you're running bow, you obviously want the bow passives. If you're crazy like me and you decide to run a Destro Staff with a Maelstrom weapon, then you can get these as well. You do want all your medium armor passives. We get things like extra weapon critical, cost reduction, and stamina recovery. Agility is the big one, though. This gives you 15% weapon damage. Of course, we're stacking that with Major Brutality, Minor Brutality, infused weapon damage glyphs. That's a big part of the build for sure. Now, Fighters Guild. We do have some Fighters Guild abilities that we're slotting either on the 1-bar or the 2-bar setup. So Slayer, this gives you increased weapon damage, 3% for each Fighters Guild ability slotted. You do want that maxed out, as well as Banish the Wicked. That's going to give you some ultimate back, letting you do your leaps quicker. Of course, that's going to lead to sustain on the build, so that is good. Undaunted passives, you do want Undaunted Metal if you have that unlocked. I decided not to go with the 511 on this setup just because I wanted the extra medium armor passives a little bit more. You can do 5 medium, 1 heavy helmet, 1 light shoulder. That'll give you 6% bonus on all your resources if you want. PvP you do not need on this build. Of course, you do want your racial passives and alchemy medicinal use. That's going to make those potions last as long as possible. All right, champion points. This will be good for either the 1-bar or the 2-bar setup. Again, focusing mainly on heavy attacks. That's what this CP setup is going to focus on as well. So in the green tree, 40 into Warlord, 35 Sprinter, 75 into Tenacity. As you could imagine, we're getting a lot of sustain off of those heavy attacks. 23 into Healthy, that's going to help our health recovery. 32 Mooncalf, 34 Shadow Ward, and 31 into Tumbling. In the blue tree, we've got 63 Physical Weapon Expert. Of course, that's because this increases the damage done with light and heavy attacks for our two-handed weapon. And you can see we get 30% bonus damage done on the heavy attack there. That's a really good bonus to have. So definitely put as much points here as you can. You want at least probably 20% bonus here from that one if you have lower CP. Master at Arms as well buffs your heavy attack. Keep that in mind. So you might be wondering, well, why not put like 100 into Physical Weapon Expert? Well, I actually found that putting more into Master at Arms, because these will combine together, gives me more damage in the long run. Plus this will buff like your Dragon Leap. So 72 points there if you have that. And then in the blue tree, a big spread here because we do have damage over time. So 34 into Thaumaturge for those dot effects. 28 into Precise Strikes. If you get a critical heavy attack, those will easily hit over 20k self-buffed. So make sure you put some points into there. 17 into Piercing, 56 into Mighty. In the red tree, 72 into Ironclad, 2 in Medium Armor Focus, 56 Hardy and Elemental Defender, 28 Thick-Skinned, and 56 into Bastion. Keep in mind, this does buff the damage shield now of your Brawler skill. So that'll make that damage shield scale up a little bit more. Plus, I think I forgot to mention on the front bar, I am running a damage shield glyph. So that'll give you about an extra 1,000 or so damage shield when that enchant procs. Last but not least, let's talk about the outfit style. How did I get kind of this brawler looking setup? So in armor styles, the head here is going to be medium silken ring. That's from the Cradle of Shadows, or you can just get that on Guild Traders. I do like the way that looks on the build. Then the chest piece, that's going to be the Minotaur Jack. That's from Gold Coast. Of course, you can get that on Guild Traders as well. And then for the hands, legs, and feet, that's going to be a medium horned dragon that comes from either Battlegrounds rewards, or I believe you can pick that up on Guild Traders as well. And then as far as the weapon, the big old two-handed hammer, that's going to be Dwarven Maul, the third weapon style right there. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the solo Stamina Dragonknight build. As usual, I'll have some gameplay here at the end so you can check out how the build works and plays. But overall, I'd say this is one of my favorite new builds that I've put together. It's just a lot of fun to play, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video this time. Of course, if you did, don't forget to heavy attack smash that like button this time. I would really appreciate it, and it definitely helps out the channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel financially, check out that join button below. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button for build videos, guides, and more ESO content every week right here on the channel. As always, thank you for your support. Thanks for watching, and I will see you around in the next video.